Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to start by describing three people, see if you can figure out what they have in common. A 3-year-old boy, broken leg, cast, confined to a wheelchair. 7-year-old girl with cerebral palsy, can't walk without braces. And a 95-year-old woman with terminal cancer, also confined to a wheelchair. Any guesses?
They all seem quite harmless to me.
They seem quite harmless, but all three of these people were deemed a security threat by TSA agents, and they were all put in advanced screening. The 3-year-old had his shirt removed and his body swabbed with cotton. The 7-year-old was told to take her braces off and walk through the screening on her own. And the 95-year-old was taken to a private room where she was asked to remove her depends because they thought she might have weapons in her diaper. That's what the purpose of my speech is for. The TSA agents that are working at airports abuse their power, and it needs to come to an end. This is a topic I feel very strongly about. I've read countless articles on this. I've watched numerous news stories talking about this, and it's just gotten out of control. I think it's important that you all listen, because if we don't stop them, eventually the TSA or other agencies are going to start infiltrating every area of our lives. What I'd like to do is threefold. I'd like to talk to you about why what they're doing is a problem, why it's happening, the causes of why it's happening, and three, finally, the solutions we can take to try to put an end to their reign of power. Before I get into that area, again, I'd like to start off by why the TSA is a problem. Essentially, they are trampling on our Fourth Amendment rights, which protects us from illegal search and seizures without probable cause. Obviously, the first three people I mentioned, there's no probable cause in the world that could have deemed them security threats where they had to go through those invasive techniques to get on a flight. When you do go to the security check and try to get through to your flight, you're left with two options. You can go through a body scanner, or you can get an aggressive pat-down. As Paul Watson, he writes for Prison Planet, wrote, the body scanners actually give a naked image of your body and lead to high degrees of cancer with TSA agents. I don't know about you, I don't want to go through anything that emits high degrees of radiation and could possibly give me cancer. If you don't want to go through the scanner, you're left with the second option, which is a pat-down, and there's countless stories out there of people who believe that the pat-down is comparable to being sexually abused. Susie Collins, and this was written about by Ben Abramson in USA Today. She was a former Miss USA pageant winner in 2004. When she didn't want to go through the scanner, she went into a private room where she had her genitals and breasts grabbed 4 times before she was deemed clear to walk through to her flight. This is out of control. It needs to come to an end. So now you know a little bit of the problems with the TSA. What I'd like to next do is just talk to you about some of the causes, why they get away with this. The first one is, and this is a famous quote, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is the problem with the TSA. There's no oversight. They act with impunity, and they don't have to answer to anybody, and that's just wrong. The second one is they're improperly trained. Susan Ito, she works for the ACLU, wrote an article outlining this. The Department of Homeland Security, who founded the TSA, actually states themselves that there's no standard protocol for how the TSA agents are supposed to act. And that gives them pretty much carte blanche to do what they want while they're in the airport, and that's not right. There needs to be a standard set of procedures for how they should act towards regular Americans. And the third one, and this is the most egregious one of them all, is the hiring process. To work for the TSA, you have to fill out an application, pass a very minimal background check, and then you get hired. But apparently that doesn't always work. In the case of this one, this was written by Ben Seminary. He works for CBSPhilly.com. Thomas Harkins, an ex-priest from Camden, was kicked out of the church because he molested 3 young girls. Guess what his job is now? He is one of the head screeners at Philadelphia International Airport, which means he gets to decide who goes into special screening and gets patted down. Personally, I have nieces, I have younger nieces, I have family, and I have friends. I never want any of them to be exposed to something like that. That is criminal activity, and it needs to come to an end. So now that I talked about the causes of why what's happening is happening, I'd like to just touch briefly on different solutions we can take to try to put an end to it. First one, file a lawsuit. You can go to a lawyer and say your Fourth Amendment rights have been breached. The second one is you can sign a petition. New Jersey Senator Mike Dougherty actually has a petition on his website asking people to sign. He wants to take it to lawmakers, and he wants to get the New Jersey state law to repeal the TSA from their airports. And the third one, and I know this may be a radical thing for people trying to get on a flight, just refuse to get on the flight. refuse to go through the cancer, the cancer screening, and refuse to get subjected to sexual molestation. Basically, that's what it is. You might not be allowed on the flight, but you know what? If the airports get enough people who refuse to go on the flight and have to issue refunds, they're eventually going to say, we can't keep losing money, and they're going to move the TSA out, and that's what needs to happen. Now, a lot of people might say, but doesn't this protect us? You know what? To a certain extent it does, but at what cost to our rights? Our Fourth Amendment rights, which I hold very true and dear to myself, are being trampled, and they shouldn't be. We have these rights as citizens, and they need to be protected. So that's pretty much it. Like I said, I mean, there is a lot of problems with the TSA. The causes are rampant. They're undertrained, they're given too much power, and they hire anybody. Now, the three people I talked about in the beginning of the speech, now we don't know any of them, and it hasn't happened specifically to any one of you, but you know what? One time it might happen. One time you may go into that room and be subjected to a pat-down where they're touching your genitals or telling you to remove your underwear, and I don't think anybody should be subjected to that, so I hope you all, the next time you go to an airport, think twice about being molested by the TSA. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, Kevin, does this fall under the Patriot Act?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Well, what happened?
Why did we as a people start screaming
Well,
when they were going to enforce that act?
Well,
Congress?
the TSA came to birth after 9/11.
Correct.
The Department of Homeland Security said we need to keep our airports safe, so they instituted the TSA, Transportation Security Authority. They were given 2 years that airports had to use the TSA. After that, they were allowed to opt out and go back to private security. Most airports have opted back to private security, but too many of them still use the TSA. I just think private security was doing a good enough job. Let them continue doing that. The TSA has not thwarted any bombing threats, so I just believe that we can go back to private security and not put up with the molestation techniques.
What kind of techniques do private security firm use versus?
Well, they use the standard metal detector. If you go off with that, they use the wand, and if you still go off with that, then they do a pat down. But it's nowhere near as invasive as what the TSA does. The TSA recently has put forth procedures where if somebody has baggy pants, their agents are now allowed to put their hand inside their waistband and go around their entire body, also feeling their genitals. I don't think any American should be subjected to that. I need one more question.
So you don't think there's any value in having the TSA at all? You don't think that they've
No.
stopped any kind of terrorist activities?
I really don't. There was a
Wasn't the underwear
There was an
bomber
underwear
killed by the
bombing.
TSA?
There was an underwear bombing that they said they thwarted, but government officials have now actually came out and said that the person that they thwarted never had a ticket to board the plane, and it was almost considered a false flag event. That he was planted there by the government to put forth more TSA guidelines.
So you don't think they act as a deterrent either?
No, I don't. I really don't. I think private security was doing a fine job. I think the TSA is just basically trampling on our rights, and it's a way to indoctrinate people into more security measures where eventually one day when you want to go to the mall, you're going to have to pass TSA. When you go to the movies, you're going to have to pass TSA. When you go to a Phillies game, you're going to have to pass through the TSA. And I think when we live in the land of the free, that's what it should mean, that we're free, that we don't have to be subjected to these type of harassments.